Yeah, well, we're going to kick off the final section with a video from Benholm, which shows the future of biophilic design and the workplace. As an example from something, maybe you can explain what it is.
It's a project we worked on recently, and it's the building manager there talking about the effect that it's had, the planting and so on, and also what they're doing with the building, which is quite interesting. We just thought it might help for this discussion about the future of the workplace. So.
My name's Kyle Jones. I'm the building manager here at CADworks in Glasgow. We're Glasgow's first net zero in operation building, and my primary role here is to keep the building running and ensure that there's a nice, pleasant environment for all the tenants as they come in on a day-to-day basis. Sustainability-wise, CADworks has it at its core. One of the things we've got is, unlike most buildings which have massive heat pumps, we've got small eco-coolers, and that helps reduce the amount of energy used in just heating fresh air that's coming in.
So what sets the CADworks building apart from the other offices that we maintain in Glasgow is the variety of displays that we have in this building. From behind me you can see the size of the living wall that we have installed and maintained. It's a really visually stunning display, and we get a lot of compliments from people walking past. We have some hanging baskets with a pothos display, and also a seating area with a large ficus tree.
The living walls had a fantastic influence on any visitors to the building, whether they be the tenants, the clients, potential new people seeking to come in. We get a lot of external people who are walking past who ask to come in just to take pictures of the living wall. We get a lot of them asking who provides it. It's obviously Benholm, who do a fantastic job. It definitely does create a very, very positive environment within the main reception area. One of the things that we have had, and especially with the living wall that we've got in place here, is we are seeing more and more tenants wanting living walls, whether it be moss, plants, flowers. It's becoming more and more recognised. The greener the workspace you have, the better a workspace you have. Offices are more and more turning towards this, not quite to the extent that you're out in the wilds, but it is something that they like to see. That little bit of greenery brings a smile to people's places and makes them happier in the workplace.
So my biggest accomplishment whilst working for Benholm is being part of a biophilic research project in partnership with PLP in London. They did a study on participants working in an office environment which was very basic. That study was taken over a week, and then after that week we came in and installed our plant display, which included a living wall, a hanging halo, some floor standing plants and an artificial tree. The participants were then working in that environment with the plants for the following week and studied again, and the results from the first week compared to the second week were outstanding. The difference that the plants made to people's morale, happiness, efficiency, productivity was just incredible.
So the planting has definitely helped us achieve the awards that we've got. A lot of our awards come for innovation on site, and part of the thing that the plants help with a lot is cleansing the air faster. Case in point, we actually had it where one of the pillars behind me back before we occupied was repainted with intumescent paint, which is some rather nasty stuff, and the air quality sensors in the area went crazy. But the areas where we had the living wall at the top of reception, actually the air cleared there faster than it did where the pillar was painted, and the whole area was gassed out. It's not nice stuff. So definitely it does improve the air quality. There's science behind it that has proven time and time again that it does work. The thing that sets us apart from other office developments would primarily be our engagement with the tenants. You get a lot of office buildings where you go in, you do your 9 to 5, you go home. There's not much engagement from the building itself. Whereas at CADworks here, we've got this fantastic urban village hall I'm sat in at the moment. Lots of plants around to create some nice biodiversity, make the place look green and clean. So far the experience working with Benholm's been absolutely fantastic. We initially had an engineer on site who looked after all the plants called Steve, and it's now been changed over to Glenn as patches have changed, and both technicians, engineers that we've had on site have been great. I don't think I've ever had a question that I've asked where if they've not been able to not answer on site, they've been able to go back and come back to me within 24 hours and say, this is why this is happening, and this is why that's happening. So a lot of knowledge coming from the teams that come out at a site level and not just the back end office area as well.
Lovely. That's really it's a really positive scene setting, actually. And I was looking at that, just thinking, and the guy was just so positive about that, wasn't he? Do you know, he's obviously a client. From our point of view, he's a client, and he's like really chuffed and advocating the air quality. He knows it. He also knows it's pushed the value of the real estate up. He knows that the clients are going to stay. They're going to want to come in. I mean, people just off the street are coming in to photograph that. So, these things are just is great. The things are changing, aren't they? That is getting better. And I think the more conversations that we can have, and like more discussions like this that we can have, and get more people from different areas in the business, I think is really good. He mentioned the words, reducing energy, cleaning air, the greener the workspace, the better the workplace. So, I mean, that's just like, what a nice little kind of takeaway with that. And also, he mentioned about awards. And we spoke before about branding, and, from your own kind of practice as well. You can, there's lots of awards now that you can go for, obviously hitting green targets, net zero, but also in terms of like positive design and all that stuff, and the impact it has on the people, the staff, and the economic bottom line and things. So, So I don't know. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Not really. No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Probably the thing I was just going to pick up on was the awards aspect. Yeah. I mean, that building has won a number of awards for a lot of different aspects of what they're doing with that one building. It's very innovative what they've been doing. You can even cycle right into the building and park in the ground there, the showers and so on. So it's kind of like they're telling the whole story. So it's very, very interesting project.
Yeah, I think it's important that to note that this is a building owner. For example, it's not a client who has it in their office and it's sort of in that office and it's the clients and the staff. It's a building owner, so it's a core area of the building. People are coming in, other tenants are coming in who are occupying different floors. Yep. So in terms of from a business development perspective, who we're tackling and talking to, it's not just the architects or the designers, it's the building developers and the people, the agents or the project developers, whatever genre they're in, talking to them about how they can make the core area of the building more inviting to bring people into the building, bring new tenants into occupy the floor spaces, because he mentioned there that some of the tenants are already starting to say, oh yeah, where does this come from, we want this in our office. So it's that message that's translating to lots of different places. So I think core areas of the building is we're always talking about office design, offices, but this is a slightly different space. It's multiple people are passing through this space.
Yeah, I was saying that core area of the building, like you say, is really important. But also, I mean, I'm always banging on about biophilic design in cities. And actually, I mean, obviously it's great for reducing heat islands, the runoff, all these things, but also that mental health and well-being before you go to work and when you leave work and you walk home, and that whole journey, where's the bus stop? Usually it's concrete and asphalt and grey and square lines and it's quite unpleasant, really, particularly if it's raining. But you know what I mean? We could do something so much different if it's got cedar roofs and I mean, there was, is it Mac? I've forgotten her name, but she does edible bus stops. She's called the edible bus stop, but there's community gardens and there's spaces where people create, again, I'm talking, we use the word activation, but it's creating those spaces where people can come together. You can do that in the workplace, you can do that outside the workplace, you can do that. There's so many things you can do. I'm just like, the world's, if you can get the right people within a business to get excited about it, and that's why it's great. The research you've done, again, it's leading by example. It's going, look, this is what's going on, guys. Be part of it. I'll get left behind, really. So, actually, maybe we could talk a little bit, just kind of in the sort of like the big picture, and then come back down to the workplace. But to talk about governance and sort of local authorities, and I know Derek, you feel quite strongly about this too, about how maybe you know governments or saying local authorities, towns, planning can do more to kind of encourage this sort of green, nature-inspired design.
Yes, I mean, I think it's patchy at the moment. There are some good things happening, but not enough. And I think that there were some government publications in these post notes they publish a few years ago, which are quoted in my book. So they've taken on that green space is valuable, has a value, but there's not enough, shall we say, it ought to be almost kind of mandatory. I don't like to say mandatory, but it has to be a little stronger, I think, in terms that when we're doing housing developments, and all we hear about is the number of houses, but the quality is very variable, let's face it. It doesn't say a lot about quality generally. And then often you see a house with a very small patch of green or something, if anything. And really, I think that we know enough now to say that, and a good lesson in lockdown, really. I have a garden and a balcony, and I felt very lucky compared to some of my neighbours who didn't have that. And I know it helped me through lockdown, and I'm sure other stories you can say about that. But besides that, in general, we know very well that, green space is really very important. And it's not given enough priority. I think that it's sort of a condition in the planning and the design of the spaces that the green, inside, outside, is a consideration. And so we need a sharper governance, I think, to ensure that. Well, there's enough information for them to be able to do that. And it's good value for money because, in the end, anything you do about health and well-being indirectly affects the cost of National Health Service. And we all know the problems with the National Health Service. And, I think, like, biophilia is a prevention more than cure. I believe we should have a more prevented is better than cure. And we should have done it a long time ago. So I think we should sharpen up on that really much.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I could just feed into that slightly more, sorry to interrupt. I mean, if it's possible, you're in a city and you're in flats and you've got that, well, let's get proper gardens allotment policies. As you know, allotments in some cities are thousands of waiting lists, very, very long. People do really want to have an allotment, and that's partly with the green, it's partly they want to become self-sufficient, but all of those things are positive things for the country, and so I really think it's important we sharpen it up a bit, we're too soft.
There's also the thing about back to well-being, though, isn't it? If we can grow our own food, it's like reduces food miles. It's there's all these things, if you can do that in a school, right from like there, that will filter through. You start with the children, like with the recycling, wasn't it? They proved that they're educating the children to put the recycling stuff in the right bins. That filtered through to the parents. So if we can do that with food and sort of like teaching them how to grow, like we're saying, if only we'd have had that sort of as part of the curriculum, particularly when you're like we kids, that you can just take that on with you.
You solve two problems there, don't you? So let's change all the school playgrounds into allotments.
Yeah.
Bring the communities into the schools and the children
And in addition to that, I wonder if you guys think there's any leverage. Like if you think about Glasgow City Centre as an example, there's so many dead spaces where people own land and it's just all boarded up. Is there any leverage or any opportunity there to start encouraging local councils to start opening that up? Does it come from a local thing or does it need to be a UK-wide thing?
It would be great if it's a government-led, wouldn't it? Really, if it's a legislation.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a shame. I mean, Glasgow does lack a lot of green spaces right in the middle of the city. You've got the two big parks, but there's so many derelict sites.
Yeah.
That are just sitting there.
We were talking at lunchtime about activism and actually acting.
Yeah.
Get your community together and do it, because if you wait for governments or local authorities, it'll never happen.
But it'll prove that it's needed, isn't it? It'll prove, and then
Voice of the people
then it gets on. I mean, but then it's back to PR and branding, though, isn't it? Comes down to, you know, communities activated this, and therefore, you know, now look at this space which was dead is now a lively community area. That gets on ITV, and you know, then the government's like, oh well, yeah, that was our idea, you know. So yeah, the more we can do, maybe not. We don't need to wait for the right moment. We can just do. But it takes guts to do that. It takes someone to really be passionate and really want to do that. I think maybe if we listened to our hearts more, we would actually just do it.
How do you think Wisewood Square would feel if we took over their green space? It's a real thing though. Yeah. That green space is stunning and it's not accessible to anyone.
Is it? Yeah. Well, there's the whole right to roam situation as well, isn't it? Yeah.
I think generally there's a lack of investment though in the UK's public realm, whereas you go to a place like Scandinavia, they really invest in that in-between space between the private and the public.
Yeah.
And we just don't do it, and it's just leftover space making the concrete.
Do you know that, I don't know if you've read, the woodland in Britain is about 14% ground. In rest of Europe, it's in the 50-60%. So we are Woodland Trust. I'm in the Woodland Trust. We're, you know, plenty more trees, but we're a long way behind in woodland terms, you know.
But that also it comes down to as well when it comes to planning and creating spaces and buildings and offices and landscaping, and if we can incorporate trees in a thing, that's also going to help, isn't it? You know, I interviewed a guy for the Miyawaki method. This Japanese method is a really intense way of planting forests. And it's like, I mean, you know, we our way of doing it, like, oh, plant. They don't. They just stick it all together, and then it becomes self-sufficient in about 3 or 4 years. Needs less water and then it just does what nature does. Because this guy called Miyawaki observed what happened in nature, and well, why don't we just do that? Why don't we mimic nature? So they do that in schools. So they only need a little tiny patch, and they can create you a mini forest. But you know what I mean. But again, that's an education thing. Because where we are now, we are again at a tipping point for that too, for the environment and for climate change. So if we can educate children like now to design better and to be better, maybe that's where the future of biophilia lies. That actually it is in schools, and maybe there is that opportunity to really make a difference. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, agriculture and our food habit is actually the #1 problem of climate change. So, yeah, definitely. And my children is teaching me now, actually, about sustainability, funny enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the industry is improving. So I was one of the panel at RIBA Midland Award, and I was there because of sustainability. And actually, at the end, they said, well, this year we are not selecting any sustainable buildings because they just didn't think that there are enough evidence and proposal that put forward, you know, substantial evidence for being sustainable. And I think this is quite a brave move for RIBA to be doing that, recognizing that, well, to tackle this, we really need to proving the way how we do our design and not just greenwashing. So it's something that we should take away for future buildings, that the maturity is getting there, that people want to see the outcome based, not just a BREEAM design certificate, looking at, really the meaning of our design.
So maybe that's it, it's not just talk. It's not just talk and box ticking, it's actually acting and doing and creating and making and sort of networking and producing different, better. I mean, what's your thoughts?
I actually want to go back to talk about the derelict high streets and these empty spaces. And I think this is why Joyce's work can also come into play, is that when a person or like an investor has a derelict space, they find it very risky to have an artist in the space or to use the space even though it's empty. They view it as a risk. But I'm thinking that your research should show up at the very up front, be like, if you green the space, if you create into a community garden, if you create into a vertical agriculture spot, how that can be a way in to show that they could get value out of the space when they're currently not getting rent. I think that could be a potential strategy you could use.
And Savannah, part of the problem with that is most local authorities give discounted rates to buildings that are not occupied. So they're saving money by having everything shut off rather than benefits giving to doing community spaces.
Is that here in Scotland or is that
I don't know. I know Glasgow definitely does it. You get reduced rates if you can prove that the building is
I see.
But we also, I think they do it in New York, don't they? They do it in some of the kind of disused areas in New York, or was it Chicago? And then they did also turn bridges into green.
The High Line, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many opportunity, and it's all the whole biodiversity thing. You know, from a government or from a council point of view, where you're trying to meet these net zeros, you know, biophilic design is all part of that. You know, it isn't like just putting the plant pot in the corner. This is about a joined up, networked approach to urban design, planning, life actually, and this is like it's kind of like inside, outside, globally. Everything is all joined up, and biophilic design is such a it's a catch-all term for all these different elements. During the sort of break, we were chatting, with Derek, about biomimetics. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but it's how we look at nature and how nature sort of behaves and does and is, and the structures of insects and all that kind of stuff, and how we can learn to adopt those different elements into our life for solutions for air quality and sort of, you know, materials and all that sort of stuff. I mean, maybe you could sort of just give us a couple of examples, Derek.
You know the gecko's foot, when they can climb on things effortlessly, upside down, vertical on ceilings, and they've manufactured a glue adhesive which is based on the chemicals in the gecko's foot, and they've suspended a car from the ceiling using that fluid. Yeah, and I'm continually amazed by things we know about limpet shells and shells of some of the crustaceans. They're very, very strong for doing different things and so on. So, and you know, you go on. I mean, the famous one that started was, of course, termites, natural ventilation in that. Another one is George Mistral and his dog. Have you heard of this? Went in the 1940s, he used to take his dog a walk, and he couldn't understand why when some of the burrs of the flowers come down on the dog, they kind of adhered to it, and they didn't float off again, blow off again. They stopped on the dog, and that was because the dog's hair they curled around each other, and that gave him the idea for Velcro. So Velcro came in the next 10 years from him. So there's many, many more stories of that kind of nature. That's a quick full one, but there are many more. You probably can know some yourself, I'm sure. And so I was thinking of the future that there'll be much more of a union, I think, between biophilia and biomimetics. And it's really fascinating. So it's amazing. I mean, you know, watch the David Attenborough programs and see, you can actually, on one of them, he goes in the undergrowth and the camera's gone right down into the termite tree, and you can see how things work. The grass cutter ants, amazing how they get a leaf, this little ant, this big leaf, and carries the thing to that. All very remarkable stuff. And so we're learning a lot from animals, and the enormous strength to weight ratio they have in doing all their things they do. So, you know, the shark, the modern swimsuit is based on the shark's skin, because the shark's skin is not really smooth. It's got denticles, and these denticles, of course, are like aerofoils that increase the flow and decrease the friction in the water. So if you want a fast swimsuit, you go for a shark swimsuit. You know, one could go on and on with these stories.
Yeah, but it's, again, it's like this sort of the nature-based solutions, which is what we talk about, is like the combination between biomimetics and biophilia. but how we can, you know, bring in biophilia and sort of that direct nature connection into our built environment for those moments of fascination and solution to find itself. It doesn't have to be a scientific thing where you go, oh, well, you know, I'm going to come up with an idea for a swimsuit. It can actually just be like, if by bringing in animals or dogs to a workplace and just seeing how they interact and giving people time to just think and consider and see that and those tender moments. And like I go back to children because you're sitting there, not yours. You know what I'm trying to say. But to bring those aspects out of us, because we do need that connection. We need the bird song so that we listen to it and we hear music. You know, some people might never hear that, you know, and sort of children might never, if they're particularly now with the loss of biodiversity, there's no sparrows. I mean, when I was a kid, there was like, you could hardly hear yourself because of the sparrows, and I was in a city, London, and now where have they all gone? And insects as well. I mean, I could just rabbit on for hours about this sort of thing. Maybe we could kind of just sort of circle back onto biofilm design. But so Savannah, do you have any kind of sort of views of like what you think the future of biophilic design in architecture or in the built environment could be? Do you have any kind of like sort of the trends that you're seeing in the practice at all?
I think there's been an upwards trend to bio-based materials and taking them seriously.
Oh, okay.
And what that would take to make it happen. So particularly with timber, can you do high-rise timber? How many forests would you need to build, would you need to grow? And can you maintain it, given how much timber we would need to build? And taking those arguments a bit more seriously. I've seen that, definitely. And also the taking seriously bio-based materials such as mycelium and thinking, is this up to standard? Can you have a mycelium-based product and a typical plasterboard product and look at the same way, and do they meet the same standards? Or can you substitute one for the other? I'm seeing a bit more of those conversations as well, which is exciting, I would say.
Yeah. Because it's sustainable as well, isn't it? So you think if you use certain plasterboards and certain stuff, I mean, you think about asbestos that was done, and obviously trying to take that down. But if it's something like a mycelium and it has got a smaller lifespan, at least you can put it back into the earth and you're not having that impact. Or can you reuse it and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, two examples. One is bamboo is using a lot more, and the other one is hemp.
Yes.
Hempcrete, you know.
Or like a special type of concrete. I forget its name right now, but it's used as little concrete as possible. It's mostly based on clay and limestone.
Yeah. So there's all this stuff that's going on, that there's just different ways. I was interviewing the guy from the NHS and I was saying, how do we bring biophilic design into the NHS? NHS Wales, they're doing quite a lot of stuff. And he said, well, every time you buy, just buy better. You know, every time you buy, making a different purchasing solution. So if you're a furniture company, you can encourage your people, your clients to buy the more economical, the more sustainable thing, which will be more economical down the line, which will help them tick their environmental boxes and stuff. You know, so again, us as designers, as providers, we can really make an impact, and I think that's probably where the future, that's where the biggest potential shift lies in actually us as facilitators on all these different aspects of the built environment. Well, what do you think? No, sorry, no, yeah, Joyce. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I should have said, yeah.
When I was at HOK, we set up a new research group about biomimicry. So we really look at the way how nature inspires building. We did put an exhibition together to see. One of them we actually use it from Arab. They use algae to build the facade, and then it helps to generate energy, similar to PV. Actually, photovoltaic panel is an example of biomimicry, using nature, absorbing sunlight and turning it into energy. So a lot of technological solutions are already using those and integrating that within our architecture. People can see that during winter, you can mix it with a bit more water so it becomes lighter, and then daylight can come in. And then, and then in the summer, the other way around, you mix it with a bit more algae, and then it becomes a sun shade. So I think a lot of this dynamic application are really becoming so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what do we? Maybe we could talk about the healthcare and the health situation. I mean, biophilic design can really support better healthcare outcomes, and we're all living longer and things. The panel's thoughts on how we can use biophilic design maybe to help improve our health in society. I mean, that could be either just in the workplace, it can be in society in general.
Well, there's, I mean, the famous work by, in '84 by, who's that guy? In hospitals, recovery rates much shorter. That was in '84, and subsequently to that, there's been a lot more work of a similar nature replicating that. So, you know, recovery rates, and that's very valuable for an NHS to have nature around, views or whatever it is. The views out of buildings there's a lot of importance now being given to that views have a big effect on people. That in hospitals was the early work, but it's generally in other buildings as well, generally. But you're talking about NHS. I think the trouble is you can't send flowers into hospital anymore, I think, because of infection things or whatever it is, the argument they have or whatever it is. But certainly the views outside are important. Yeah.
And virtual nature.
Virtual, yes. Yeah. Yin in Harvard has done some good virtual studies. And there's one of these sense boxes you can step into when you go into a place, and you get a picture of what mood are you in, or smiling or not, or miserable or what, and you press the dial, and then up comes a lovely biophilic picture which is supposed to help you to get a better smile or a up smile or whatever. And apparently this Dutch work works, apparently. I mean, I don't have the figures or anything, but yeah, so this virtual, I mean, obviously it's the second best to actually have implants.
We've actually been working with Stuart on trying to provide some planting. So it's actually a moss wall that we're doing, but it's a covered, so it's got kind of a glass or perspex cover on it. So it's sealed, but it's still giving you the effect of the real moss. So again, you know, it'd be interesting just to see where that goes. We're about to trial it, aren't we? And we've actually got something. We've got a sample in the greenhouse to have a look at. So.
But I mean, certainly they found that if you, in the transit spaces between wards and that, they put up art and pictures and this, that, and the other. And that is cheering, because you used to get this standard pale blue colour, government colour of someone, very boring. And so, you know, you can do things like that. So,
We're also going to essentially look at terrariums as well. So it's a bit more control, but it allows us to get a little bit of actual nature, which we've been trying for about 30 years to get into health environment. And as you say, we always do the views, etc. But it's how we get that into the build. And if we can't get plants in there, we do things like just things that actually have a cognitive relationship, like if it's a flame. So we call it, it's well known and documented, it's about distractive therapy in healthcare. So if you've got a lot of things weighing on your mind, it allows you to just connect with something in nature, and then it slightly takes your mind off it, things, you know, so it's just reassuring.
Yeah, dentists have in some used, well, they've used music as well, but also used pictures, dynamic pictures going above, so your pain is reduced.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the one that's on the staircase, there's a lovely example of calming immersion. So rather than just being a flat image,
exactly.
Something else draws you in because it's slightly coming out with the planting.
Absorbs the mind.
Exactly. So it's just a way of immersion. You know, we also try things with projections as well and all sorts of things. But but this is quite an exciting thing. Although it's baby steps, it's amazing. You know, no one's done this thing before really. So we're quite excited. But so watch the space. Terrariums possibly next.
And also relating, you know, your question about healthcare and you know, what is the future for that? I think it's beyond the hospital. So Derek talks about the use of sensors. So wearable is the prevention of knowing it before, and you know, and then I think employer needs to take a different role as well in this to health employee to be, preventing the health issue much before.
Absolutely. I think certainly in the UK, well, it's very much the industry is a kind of reactive industry rather than preventive industry.
Yeah.
So absolutely, if you can talk about well-being and things you eat and things, treat it before it happens, why not? And I think that's all part of the cyclical thing.
Yeah, but I think it's happening already. There are loads of apps from HR organisation are helping us to understand a bit more of stress and habits, lifestyle habits.
But even going back to the growing thing and the therapy of growing, and in a lot of our hospices and dementia centres, just the act of growing something has a psychological, it's a very grounded thing to do, even though it might die, whatever sort of thing. It's just seeing it go from a seed into a shoot.
Sure.
And so that again, it's all just
it's interconnected. It's part of the knowing. It's a growing agriculture. You know how food grows. You know that actually insects are not scary living in the city, and then all those kind of things being connected, and it becomes a change of mindset. If you know the mechanism, you start to appreciate that. And it becomes, part of the bigger picture.
Absolutely, and even possibly, fizzy gardens, like the old fizzy gardens, herbal gardens for treating ailments. Again, it's kind of frowned upon a little bit in NHS, but because everything's about produced drugs. But hopefully that might even come into it as well. I don't think so.
Yeah, if you think about it, though, where does like aspirin come from and things, So it's all from, well.
All medication. And what they're finding in the rainforest, it's like amazing what they're finding in the properties of the plants out there.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe all the pharmaceutical companies could end up being like massive greenhouses. So maybe that's what you could move into, kind of like that's the future of Benholm. I'm really excited about it. I think I'm seeing a seismic shift in people's attitudes and understanding of biophilic design. Nature-based solutions, and I'm really positive about it. Are you guys? Is it just generally? Are you sort of upbeat about it, or are you kind of tearing your hair out, or is it kind of like a sort of? Are you feeling positive?
Well, for me, I'm definitely feeling positive. I think we have a long way to go. Of course, I'm not saying it's all easy, but yes, because I think the younger generations are naturally inclined to these things, have more awareness than perhaps some of us, like me, older person, did when we were that age. And I think that awareness is really important to do, and it can be part of the teaching in biology and science and so on. I take a wider look. We've got a school in Germany which has got a herb garden on the roof of the infant school, and it's wonderful. The children love it. You watch children when they go down to pools looking with their nets, just looking at little things in the pool and so on, that it captivates them. And I think that sort of thing will always remember in your mind when you're an older person. You'll always remember that experience, I'm sure. So I think the younger we start, very young with children, doing those built into the schooling day, as it were, somehow, will be very rewarding. And I think there will be more of that, and that makes me optimistic for the future, that they're going to grow up with that kind of mindset,
Yeah, and I've because obviously I run the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast series, and everybody I interview, because I ask them, where does it come from, and all this kind of thing. Why are you doing what you do? Why are you interested in nature, and why are you interested in biophilic design, and all these different aspects of it? And every single one of them said, oh yeah, well when I was a kid, I used to go out with my paddling pools, or I'd go into the sea, and I'd go to my grandparents, and I'd sit there and, like you just said, looking at the grapes and eating the grapes off the. We have this connection when we're kids, and we have these really fond memories of it. So yeah, I think if we can just get everybody and sort of, particularly from a young age, into it. I think we're off to a good start. I think really, and I think there is a change. Maybe what do you think? What's your sort of thoughts?
All I was going to say is I think the being creative, I think, is really key to this whole thing, because from our perspective, we're always saying to ourselves, well, how do we bring nature, planting, and so on? How how do we bring it in, but in a more creative way? How can we do something with it that it hasn't been done before? You know, it wasn't long ago that, you know, we put plants on the walls. I mean, that's actually quite, you know, relatively new. We put plants on the ceilings now as well. So, you know, and then I saw someone was doing the other day, they'd actually done a planted floor. So again, there's all sorts of things you can do. But I think what I wonder is if we're creative, we think outside the box as far as the future is concerned. What is next? How do we actually, you know, are we always trying to push those boundaries? Nature has got so many opportunities, hasn't it?
Don't let us forget Century Gardens. I was very moved years ago when in Southampton there was then a Century Garden predominantly for blind people, but I mean anyone could go. But they were thinking of the disabled with some disablement like that, and so they emphasise fragrance. You know, give them some pleasure. They've lost one mode, but they've got this strong one, another one. But even if you weren't blind, you still could enjoy it, of course. There's Century Gardens. There's a lot of work on Century Gardens. Very lovely spaces. Remember the disabled.
Yeah, I'm just saying, inside the house, you know, we've learnt that like jasmine's supposed to help us study better. Rosemary as well. That's great for if you're bereaving. So if you're in a like third age environment, if you can create places with rosemary planting around it, we know that helps us from aromatherapy point of view.
Yeah, and it stimulates memories as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You know, but it also helps bereaving families, and do you know what I mean? Having these whole thought processes. I mean, there's all the old wives' tales that we've kind of go, oh yeah, that was just like that's then, but there's some elements of truth in it. You know, we shouldn't always, you know, just cast aspersions. We've moved too far away, maybe slightly. So yeah, what's your sort of?
Well, I think stay positive, like keep learning and try not to get too frustrated. I think we are at the junction that we need to have biophilic design or sustainability in general to be developing at speed and at scale. Especially the environment that I'm in, like it, you know, I can see the big picture, but actually pushing for a certain strategy is difficult. So I'm hoping that this research that I work with PLP and Derek will help the design industry to have a tool, to have a more kind of powerful, more robust way to argue with the decision, not argue, lobby with the decision maker on making, you know, the right choices. Taking the decision and stick with it, be consistent. Sorry, I'm dragging on. I'm not supposed to talk about politics, isn't it?
I've steered away from asking you lots of things.
Yeah. But I guess the good news is technology is improving. We don't really, when we started properly 5-6 years ago, I struggle to look at some of the data. We start with brainwave study, and it is not part of what designer knows about. But it's getting a lot more easier now to measure, and it comes with the outcomes. So hopefully, you know, with everything that tuck in together, community, activism, technology, and, you know, political will, we will still, you know, move forward to the right direction.
And then I would also be optimistic. I think as long as people continue to call for more biophilic design, that will lead to often more persuasive data, research, argumentation, storytelling, that it will continue to be a point of, not a point of conflict, but a point of interest. And I think that will only continue as time goes on.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're nearly near the end. Just as a sort of heads up, I'm going to have a biophilic design conference first week of November 2024. So please all come. I'm going to make sure these guys are there. Yeah, it's in person. It's hybrid, so people that can't get there because it's going to be global, obviously, as well. But we're going to do the first one in London, and then the next one will be in Canada, by the look of it, and it's going to sort of tour. So yeah, there'll be other little spin-off things, but there'll be a membership area and all this sort of malarkey. But yeah, but in the podcast, if anyone's, I know a few of you already know our podcast series, and obviously I've interviewed Adrian before, but at the end of each podcast, I ask this magic question. If you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like? So, and I love that question. It's like my favourite question. So I'm gonna leave you with that thought with you guys, but I'm going to ask the panelists what their ideas are. But when you go away and when you're on the train home and you're in the car home, just think about what it would look like for you. If you could have a magic brush of biophilia, what would the world look like? And that's something we can all sort of aim towards. So, Adrian, I'm going to start with you. What's your...
Well, I think I answered it for you just not long ago, but I think my view is that for a long time we've possibly viewed nature and planting and that sort of thing, particularly in the work environment, as an extra. And I think if you were to looking forward, we should say everyone deserves it. Everyone should have contact with nature. It should be something that we've all got, and it's just a given that you have it. That would be my answer.
Okay, thank you. And Derek?
Well, at the moment we're getting almost every day something about artificial intelligence, and there is the very good side of artificial intelligence, especially in medicine, but we've also got the concern that are we going to remain as pure human beings, or are we going to become humanoids? Are we going to try and extend all our sensory mechanisms, and so much that we become a sort of human being extra or a humanoid? And now that's a concern for many people, I think. But the opposite end of the scale, we have nature. And so nature is the offset to artificial intelligence. It's the opposite, because artificial intelligence does not have a soul or a spirit, but nature does. So people say to me, we can compose music like Bach. I said, yes, but the artificial intelligence production is very clever, but doesn't have any soul and spirit of Bach at all. And I think that is going to be, a wider spectrum for our world. And I think biophilia may be the saving of us in terms of not being humanoids, but still remaining as human beings with souls and spirits.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not coming up with any original idea, but I think Dr. Joseph Allen quoted this: biophilia is a human right. And I hope the research that I'm doing is invalid very soon. We don't need to ask the question of what is the value of biophilia. So this should be a good one.
And I love this question because I am a dreamer. And I think a lot of things, like if I could paint the world's a magic brush for biophilia, I think I'd do a couple things. The first would be living, breathing buildings. So not nature to be controlled, not nature to be maintained, but nature to collaborate with. So can your building be self-healing, self-regenerating? Can you maintain the building with it? I love that idea that we collaborate with it, live with it. But the second one is, have you seen, so it's a commercial, and it's called Dear Alice, and it's by Chobani, and it's fabulous. And I love the realm they picture or imagine. It has the human engineering, human ingenuity with plant-based solutions in a way that you have renewable energy and community farming, and it's just really beautifully done. So I would highly recommend looking at it. Not sponsored by Chobani, and that's the world I'd love to see, the world I dream of.
That's lovely. Well, thanks so much, and thank you guys. But first of all, we'll thank the panelists. Let's do that. And Adrian, you would like to wrap up?
Yeah, just again, thanks to coming along, and thanks to everyone for coming here today. And as a company, our sort of strapline is, this is where creativity blossoms. Hopefully it's done that today for all of you. It certainly has for me. I think it's been really useful. So I don't know if it helps at all, we've just got a couple of things here, just some examples of some of the work that we've done, some of the things that we do. It was really appreciate you coming and seeing where we are, and it was really just to cover if there's anything that you might be interested, just to see some of the types of work we've done. There's this next one, I think, is this was the Chambre Vert project at the Blytheswood Square Hotel, where we turned one of their standard hotel rooms into an immersive spa experience. It was a really interesting project, sort of collaboration, and they had all sorts of the nature sounds, and they were doing these sort of therapies and so on with the room, and it was a really interesting project. Again, what kind of came out of that is people that were using that space were saying, you know, this was just something completely out of this world. This was totally different, and so as a result, the hotel has actually transformed a whole load of other spaces kind of off the back of that, which has been really interesting. We also did work for I don't know if you've been to the Johnny Walker Visitor Centre. So this one here, all this planting in the upside down space, we used a lot of preserved plants and dried plants and a bit of artificial planting, trying to replicate the four corners of Scotland, which is the four blends that go in to make up Johnny Walker. Yeah, again, really interesting just to get all the detail to actually replicate that type of planting. So even the rocks are carved out of polystyrene because it's all hanging upside down. So it was really interesting project. Yeah, we did some planting at Edinburgh Airport a little while ago, and we put some banana trees in because they thought they'd look nice, and they actually produced real bananas. We were as surprised as everyone else. So that was quite an interesting one.
How long did it take for the bananas to produce?
Yeah, so from when they went in, Derek, can you remember? Was it about a year? From when we put the trees were fully grown, but it was obviously just the right environment, and they just, yeah, it would have been.
It was about a year.
Yeah.
And then once it started to flower, like the growth of bananas, it would just take a few weeks.
Yeah.
Amazing experience.
Huge, massive things. It actually basically kills the tree, doesn't it, to produce that? Yeah.
It's their only shoot,
yeah. So, but that was quite an interesting one. We also.
So that's not a fake picture.
No, it's genuinely the thing. Yeah, it all got in the news as well.
When I used to do maintenance.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is Scottish Natural Heritage in Inverness. That's their headquarters. They're not called Scottish Natural Heritage anymore. They're called something different. Nature Scotland, yeah. But this was one of the first excellent rated BREEAM buildings, and it's what I call a really good example of biophilic design, because you've got the stone, the timber, you've got loads of natural light. It's all naturally ventilated. It's a beautiful building, and we put all the planting that we put in they wanted to kind of make it look like sort of what you see outside in Scotland, which of course with tropical plants is a little bit tricky. So we kind of went for very sort of rugged looking planting and so on. And all the pots were made of eco-friendly materials and magnesium and jute fibres and so on. But one of the interesting things that's kind of come out of that project is that the compost that we were using had peat in it, and peatland conservation at that time, so this was like about 20 years ago or something, the peatland conservation was one of their key things. They said, well, if it's got peat in it, we can't have it in the building. So we were kind of like, back to the drawing board, what do we do now? And that's when we started using the EnviroCulture system, which is here, which is a totally peat-free, soil-free planting system based on the hydroculture type system. And the roots of the plants just grow in these little clay granules. So it's a very, very environmentally friendly way of doing the planting. And we've been using it an awful lot since then, and it's well worth considering. What's the next one? Yeah, we did the planting at COP26 in Glasgow. So this was the kind of big sort of feature behind all the interviews and so on they did, which was quite an interesting one.
Did you guys have anything to do with, because what was it, something about like the New York Times donated a lot of the plants or something to SWG3? Did you guys then have any link in with, SWG3 in Glasgow, the community centre project? Because there was a really nice news story about that
Okay.
from COP26 about one of the big newspapers in the States had like brought in all these plants and trees.
Okay.
and donated.
Yeah, no, we weren't involved in that. I know the one you mean now. Yeah, no, we weren't actually involved in that. No, that was.
It was a nice story.
Yeah, it was. It was good.
They used it all on the community garden.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was a huge space and loads of planting, wasn't it? That's right. Yeah, yeah. So what else have you got there? CADworks here. We talked about that one. The only other thing I was just going to. This isn't actually one of our jobs. This next one. This is actually Amazon's offices in Seattle. Yeah, it's called the Spheres. The reason why I just thought I'd just mention this, but the principles we've been talking about biophilic design, they do apply. They're not just for big companies. The same principles apply in a little office as it does in a big office. It's really just, I've used this a few times just to sort of have that conversation, because I think, you know, the principles, the contact with nature, it works wherever we are and in any environment and at any scale. So, you know, I always think that's really kind of quite a good thing to bear in mind. So we've been working a lot, as I think I mentioned it earlier, working a lot with interior designers, anyone that's designing spaces, to try and make sure that we're helping you to do what you need. We've got a new area on the website called The Hub, which has got a lot of resources for all sorts of questions that come up. We're constantly updating it. And obviously we're here to help make your life easy and help you to look good when you do your projects. So that's pretty much it. Just thanks again. Sorry, did you want to?
Is the Nordic Moss video still on the website?
Yep, yeah, still there. Do you want to do that?
No, well, I don't know if time for that.
We've probably slightly run out of time, so
Generally
yeah.
speaking, most people probably have seen it, but it's very interesting about moss.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a number of videos on the website, but there's one all about the Nordic Moss product, which gives you a little bit of background as to where the moss comes from and how it's made and how it then we use it in the walls and so on. So well worth a look. Can share it with you all afterwards.
Oh,
yeah. So downstairs, I think they've just cracked open some champagne, if anyone's interested. And we've got have a look around in the greenhouse, see what we've been up to, see how some of the things that we do with that, if that's of interest.
all right. Good.
Good. Thank you very much.